Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Behind the Mic, the show where we uncover the stories and the personalities of the experts leading our construction industry. I'm your host, Julianne Tolentino, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Edward McCluskey, Head of Contract and Claims Advisory Services at Compass. Today, our conversation will revolve around proactive and reactive contract management and how anticipating contractual issues early can significantly impact project outcomes. Edward, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you feeling?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. So today our conversation will revolve around proactive versus reactive contract management, which I don't think we've personally talked about in the show. So this is an exciting kind of space that we can talk about it in detail. But before we jump right into the conversation, can you give us a short introduction about yourself?
Absolutely, yes. As you said, I'm Head of Claims and Contract Advisory at Compass.
Yeah.
Background, I'm a chartered surveyor and chartered arbitrator. I've worked in the region for many years, 18 plus years, been involved in many of the older projects in Dubai and some of the newer projects in Dubai as well, from basically conception all the way through to resolving final issues. Yep.
Amazing. So you've seen the best of both worlds, the old Dubai and the new one.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Fantastic place.
Just to set the tone of our conversation today, in your words, how would you define proactive versus reactive contract management? What are the core differences that you think must be talked about?
Okay, so Bishop Desmond Tutu, right? He once said, we need to understand, we need to stop pulling people from the river and we need to go upstream and see why they're falling in, okay? So I think that encompasses everything about proactive and reactive contract management. From a reactive perspective, you're dealing with things that have happened. Yep. So it's already occurred. You're dealing with the consequences, and your scope for mitigating or correcting is really limited.
Right.
From a proactive perspective, you're looking forward. You're predicting when things are going to happen, and you're taking action to try and stop those things happening.
Right.
Yep. So that's the difference.
Way to put it.
Yep.
Proactive management is often kind of seen as cost efficient, right? Because you're not making the changes as they happen. But is it always feasible in practice, you think?
So, number of things, right? When we talk about contract management, every contract is unique. Yep. And there's many different perspectives from a contracting, when one enters into contract. You've got the employer's perspective, you've got the contractors, you've got the consultants, and they all look at the contract from what obligations do they have, what do they have to do.
Yeah.
Yep. So in some instances there will be actions that they have to take, that are relatively proactive, and there are some that are kind of reactive. So if there's a delay, for example, you have to give a certain notification and all that good stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
So the cost when it comes to contract management from a reactive point of view, it's after the event and it's not very predictable.
So it could be less or more depending.
Yeah, but from a proactive perspective, what you're doing is you're investing time upfront to reduce any of these costly effects actually occurring. Yep. So it is an investment, and what sometimes is overlooked is that return on investment. So you are getting something back. You're actually saving yourself money when you spend the time up front to prevent these items happening.
Makes sense. I think that's a similar concept to why people would opt for more sustainable homes. Even if it's a bit more expensive, it costs less to like water consumption and all of these things. So that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So let's talk about the common misconceptions of proactive and reactive. So reactive management often has a negative connotation, and from what you've talked to me about now, that seems to be the case. But are there any situations at all where it's the only necessary way to go by the contract?
So yes, it may be the form of contract that dictates how the parties behave. Yep. generally the older forms of contract require a more reactive form of management.
Okay.
Okay. It doesn't necessarily have a bad reputation. It's just how we used to do things in the past. Yep. Which doesn't make it wrong. So we're basically, we're imperfect human beings leading imperfect human beings, right? And we've got, what we're looking to do is avoid the common pitfalls and learn from the past, which is really easy to say, but in reality, it can be quite a challenge because you're changing mindsets. You're creating an environment of trust where you're expecting one party to say, look, we are potentially facing a problem here. Putting liability to one side, how do we collectively avoid this and move forward? And that is a massive step. But 9 times out of 10, it's the right step.
Right. And from a dispute resolution point of view, and as an arbitrator yourself,
yes,
is there differences in the amount of time and effort being put in proactive versus reactive, or what do you see usually?
Yes, I think it is. It's the return on investment. So initially, when projects are being set up, you're going to have prices for your concept, schematic, detail, tendering, all that good stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's that upfront early investment to think, okay, if we have this particular type of foundation, this particular type of cladding, and as you mentioned too, sustainability, what are the long-term benefits? What is the life cycle of those particular elements of that asset? How do you future-proof it? So it's taking all these things into consideration. It may be short-sighted, okay, the market might be right, so you're dictated by time.
Right.
Okay, so we have to design it very, very quickly. It might not be future-proofing, but it meets the current needs of the market.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
And do you think the clients that you work with or the stakeholders in the industry understand the cost and the benefits of either one, or is it something that you will have to step in for them to to understand these concepts?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to let the stakeholders know there are different options out there. Yep. So it's never a one size fits all. It's always right. What are the needs of the market? What are the needs of the stakeholders? And how do we best address those needs?
Yeah.
Yep, by doing the right things. Now, when it comes to contract management in particular, generally speaking, the proactive approach is far superior than reactive. I mean, I think it was someone on Facebook, naming no names, that actually said, look, let's go fast. And if you go fast, you might break things, right? The alternative to that is let's go fast and fix things. Because you want to avoid, in the reactive, it's pretty binary. It's this or it's that. Yep. From a proactive perspective, you've got many different options.
Yeah.
That you can take. What do we let this happen? What are the consequences? If we take a different course of action, there may be a cost, but there may be a saving further down the line. Yep. It's that ability to, and it's not necessarily crystal ball gazing, because you're basing it on science. What are the likelihoods of these various things that are going to happen?
All right.
Yep, scenarios.
It's a great one. Now I want to talk about the role of tech and AI, which is a buzzword that we've been experiencing in the market now with real estate, with developers. AI is a big, conversation starter with a lot of people. With advancements, how do you see proactive contracts management evolving with the help of these new technologies?
I think it was April 1912. Okay, the Titanic.
Okay, we're going way back.
Okay, we're going way back here. That was a reactive situation. When you look at what actually happened, there were certain conditions, there were foggy conditions. It was an area known for icebergs. It was a very experienced captain. The ship was going too fast. It was going too fast for the conditions, against the captain's experience. The lookout post, they had binoculars. They never used binoculars. There were messages from other ships that there were icebergs in the area. Those were completely ignored. The iceberg was hit, and then we know what happened from there, right? So it was all reactive. If things had been done differently, and the information that was available had been used, it could have turned out very differently.
Yeah.
And when you look at shipping today, they use future technology, GPS, sonar, all these kind of real-time maps, so that they avoid
and predict things.
And predict exactly situations that are going to happen, so that they try and avoid them. Yep. So when it comes to AI, let's not forget the word artificial in there, but it is intelligence, but it's based on what we have done in the past from different projects.
Yeah.
So I think one of the important things, it's fantastic, yes, but it has to be calibrated. And I think this is one of the important things with AI. Where is it getting its information from? What are the scenarios that are being run?
Yeah.
And how do we know that these scenarios are calibrated against similar real-time events that have either happened or highly likely to happen?
That's right. And do you think AI can really predict contractual risks? Or as you've mentioned, because with artificial intelligence, we still get historical data. What if those historical data were not the best solutions? How does it work then?
Data is very complex, right? And there's tons of it, right? So you've got many different situations. So, for example, in the data center world right now, there is a huge push to create these data centers to meet the demands of the market.
Yeah.
Yep. But there's a very finite supply chain. So when you put too much pressure on a supply chain, it can't meet the demand, which is a massive risk in itself. So one, you've got the supply chain risk, and then two, you've got the construction risk. What are your timelines? What are your ground conditions? Is it a unique design? Is the employer buying all the plant and equipment? How is the risk allocated in the contract? So AI can predict the risks, but it is pulling that data together, understanding what the parameters are, and then understanding what options it may give you. So I don't think it's necessarily, okay, here's the full risk for this project. I think here are a number of risks that could occur, and then it's working with the team to mitigate what risks might be there and how to reduce that risk.
And the team still has to be, they still have to have the skill set to manage these. And I think that also comes with, sharing and knowledge sharing with different international.
Communication.
Yes, communication.
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Let's go with high pressure environments then. And this is very much relevant for Dubai, specifically in the UAE, where deadlines are tighter and projects are bigger than ever. So do you find it harder to convince teams of the value of proactive management in such an environment like this? Or do you see that they're more open to these kind of things now?
I would say that in a high pressure environment, you want to reduce your reactive management as much as possible. Because in a high pressure environment, you've got very little time to mitigate what may be happening. So you want to be using your reasonable foresight based on science, not just hearsay, as to what might happen. So I think in the high pressure environment, Dubai, I think, has always been ambitious in what it's doing, and that is fantastic. And it's always managed it relatively well, which is great. So I think you do that through, one is the communication with your team, and it goes back to the very beginning, where do you have enough capacity to undertake this work? Yes. There's the financial checks that need to be undertaken on the contractors. Do they have the financial capability? Do they have the previous experience? Where are they getting their supply chain from? So it's monitoring all that to deliver in the high pressure environment.
All right. I want to talk about Compass then. You've just recently joined as their head of contract and claims advisory.
Yes.
What does it look like for you on a day-to-day basis when it comes to dealing with projects, maybe in the UAE or in the wider GCC? What are some common things that you have noticed from a proactive point of view and a reactive point of view?
Yes. So we've got the new service line that Compass is offering, and that's in response to the market needs. So it's very much operational flexibility. What is the market dictating? What's the feedback that we're receiving from our clients? How do we show that Compass themselves are an investment to the project. Yep, so there is a return on that investment. So the Middle East has always been ambitious, as I said, and with that comes opportunity. So whether it's through value engineering, looking at how we can improve the costs, or mitigating any of the program or project risks, you get a lot of claims generally that don't have any kind of contractual basis or the like. So it's negotiating that, and that there's generally two positions. One will be your strict legal position, where it's either a yes or a no, and the other is a commercial position. So yes, it might not necessarily be this, but for the betterment of the project, then we might decide to take a different course of action. So it's looking again at the options, what are the reasons for those options, and what's the science to back it up.
All right. So my last question to you is, looking forward, do you believe that the industry will eventually adapt proactive management as the norm? Or do you think, personally, there's still going to be some need for reactive management? What's your stance on this?
Proactive management, all the way. However, you will never reduce the reactive element, because there are things like, if we take shipping as an example again, right, you've got ships that are on the top of the ocean and you don't know what lurks beneath. It's very similar in construction. As soon as you enter the ground, there could be archaeological artifacts that may be in the ground of historical importance. There may be services, there may be rocks. There are so many things in the unknown. So whilst you can't predict everything, you can predict the majority, but there will be that small element that, okay, how do we manage this when it occurs?
All right, very well said. Thank you so much, Edward. It is my pleasure.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed my conversation with Edward, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on our social channels. As always, stay informed, stay ahead, and I'll see you in the next one.